Hey, Andrew Masters here from my home studio in Nashville. Barefoot Sound recently released a Gen 2 of my favorite studio monitors. They're Footprint 01 and Footprint 02, and I want to tell you the top 5 things that I love about them. All right, so the first thing is I've been using these Footprint 01s from Barefoot for the last couple of years, and they have changed a bunch of things in a very positive way, which we're gonna break down in these 5 different reasons. So the Gen 2, when I got them, the first thing I felt listening to them is they almost felt like a more mature version, and what I felt when I was listening to them is like, it feels like they sound, this is gonna sound corny, it feels like they sound more expensive. Like somehow like the detail and the imaging and just the clarity of them felt even better than the Gen 1 version, which I already loved. Now, of course, releasing a Gen 2 of an already incredibly successful product is pretty tricky because you don't want to change anything that takes away from the first thing that everyone loves. So the improvements they made were both on the inside of the speaker and the outside of the speaker, just subtly with some of the appearances. It's my personal feeling that they did a really great job of essentially just enhancing everything that was already great about the Gen 1 speakers that I loved. This next generation model introduces a fully tri-amplified 3-way architecture, providing dedicated Class D amplification for each driver to ensure optimal performance, headroom, and efficiency across the frequency spectrum. At the heart of the Footprint 01 is a suite of newly developed Barefoot drivers, including a 1-inch dual ring radiator tweeter, 5-inch aluminum cone mid-range driver, and dual 8-inch aluminum cone woofers integrated into the cabinet using a proprietary dual force technology coupling system engineered for extended linear excursion, reduced distortion, and improved transient response. These custom drivers deliver a tighter imaging and more revealing soundstage. The new DSP platform features SPOC, spectrally optimized conversion, Barefoot's very own patented technology that introduces analog crossover filtering before digital conversion, preserving high frequency detail and significantly improving signal to noise ratio. This allows the Gen 2 to achieve higher resolution, improved clarity, and ultra low latency for an unmatched mixing and monitoring experience. All right, reason number 2 that I love them, the low end that these speakers produce is insane, as well as the listening position. A couple years ago, I was using a different set of speakers in this room that I was in. This is a bonus room in Nashville above my garage, and it's got this like angled ceiling thing here. Now, I had been having some issues with the speakers I had been using in the past, and I'd used a variety of different models and different company speakers. I'd tried stuff with subs, without subs, and I was having some serious low-end problems, and I'm sure you may have experienced some with your room and perhaps your speakers as well. Then I was out visiting a studio here in Nashville called Graybox, and they had these Footprint 01 speakers in their room. Now, I had not been a Barefoot user, and I'd really not even listened to them that much at the time, but I was pretty frustrated with having to go out and do all these car checks and having things not be how they were supposed to be, or at least how I thought they were when I was listening to them in my room. So I said to Cody, who's the engineer at Graybox, can I listen to some stuff on these speakers? And my first thought was these were not going to be for me just because of how they looked. The front of them has these tiny little tweeters and mid drivers. I was like, these are going to sound small and not what I want. I want more low and I want more bang for buck with the speaker. And we turned them on, immediately looked under the desk. I'm like, where's the subs for these speakers? Like, there is so much roundness and body, and the stereo imaging of them was huge. They sounded phenomenal. And he said, there's no subs. And he goes, these are 3-way speakers, and they have these dual force side firing subs built into them. So you only have your left and your right, and you get this full grand picture. So that led me to go and get a set for myself for my studio. And when I brought them in here, it immediately fixed 2 things. Number 1, I could hear low frequencies. Specifically, I was having issues between 50 and 80 hertz in my listening position, which made me have to like push my speakers that I had really, really far away from me just so I could kind of get a feeling of some low end from those speakers. Now there's positives and negatives about having your speakers really far, but for me, keeping the speakers pretty far away was a net negative, and I just mostly wanted them to be a bit closer to feel like near field speakers to me. So with the O1s, I was able to bring them in closer to where I was sitting, and that fixed the imaging, that fixed the, I actually had low end. The 50 to 80 hertz came right back. It felt so good. I even brought in an acoustician here in town, Music City Acoustics, to listen to it and help me decide if I needed to do anything. We ran a bunch of room tuning tests, and he said, honestly, it sounds great in here. He's like, I wouldn't change a thing. So that sealed the deal for me. It fixed two major problems for just my ability to hear what's going on with the music that I was working on. Now that brings us to reason number 3 that I love these speakers, which is the overall listening experience. Now I've worked as an engineer for like 15 years now. It's not a super long time, but it's not a super short amount of time. So throughout all those years, I've had the luxury of working with all sorts of speakers, from very, very budget speakers to passive speakers on an amp to active speakers to really, really insanely expensive speakers. And these Barefoot Gen 2 footprints are my absolute favorite listening experience, which also, like, you can't talk about without mentioning the meme switch. So if you haven't heard of the meme switch, it's basically this little switch that you get right here that connects to your speakers. This allows you to shuffle through 4 different settings of your speakers so that you can check your work or check your music essentially on 4 very different listening profiles. You have your hi-fi setting, your flat, which is the standard Barefoot footprint setting, and you have your old school, which is like an NS10 sort of listening profile, and your cube, which is the old mix cube profile. So with one switch, you're able to jump between 4 very different experiences so that you can check your work or mix in a variety of different settings, but you only have one set of speakers set up so you can have your listening position exactly how you want. And you're not having to compromise your listening position to be able to reference multiple different sets of speakers. Now, as an aside, I will say on the Gen 2s, the hi-fi setting is actually my personal favorite. As soon as I turned it on that, I said, this is the best one. This is my favorite. I know flat is sort of the standard, but we're talking about my favorite stuff here, and the hi-fi is my absolute favorite. And that's if we're tracking, mixing, or just listening back to records. Now, the 4th thing that I love about these speakers is they seem to work in just about any room you put them in. When I got them, I was in this bonus room above my garage, which, you know, I have some acoustic treatment in here. And as I had mentioned before, I had some issues with the other speakers that these seemed to solve right away, which was nice. I didn't have to add a sub, anything like that. But since I got them a couple years ago in this room, I have actually had to move studios a couple times. And so I got to take these speakers with me and listen to them in a variety of different rooms that I was working in. It was stunning how well they translated in environments that were not ideal home studio environments, that we just sort of had to throw stuff together and make it work. The listening experience was so consistent and so good across the board in different rooms. That is very, very rare, and I'm not exactly sure why they work so well, but I can tell you as a user who just needed to get to work, it was a relief to have them with me in each space. Now, outside of working in the studio myself, one of the other things I do is help other people with their studios, and I constantly recommend that they get these speakers for them as well, because it just is the most dependable thing that I know we put up. It's going to sound great in just about any environment that they are in. So if you're considering getting some Barefoot Gen 2s, then make sure you contact your Sweetwater sales rep and ask them about the Gen 2 Barefoots. Now, the 5th and final thing I love about these speakers is it allows me to just be able to work and trust that what I'm doing is actually how it sounds. Now, I mentioned before, when I switched to these, the work that I was doing was translating really well outside of my studio. This means that when I am mixing something or I am doing audio for something in my studio, I'm making certain decisions because I think that's the best decision for the project I'm working on. Now, if you leave your studio and you go listen somewhere else and you go, oh, that doesn't seem like this decision that I made, then that is a big giant problem, because then you have to come in and you have to sort of guess what it's going to translate to outside of your studio. But with the footprints, I can trust that it's going to sound the way I wanted it to sound, regardless of where you're listening. Now, I think it's safe to say we've all experienced that at one time or another. And when you get that right, where your speakers actually translate, you can imagine it saves hours of work time on every single project you're doing, which in the end makes these speakers worth every penny. It's also worth mentioning some of the other mixers who trust these speakers are guys like Chris Lord-Alge, Eddie Kramer, Manny American, and Butch Vig. These are guys who know how to make some good sounding records. So if you want to check them out, again, make sure to contact your Sweetwater sales rep. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button on this video and subscribe to Sweetwater's channel for more great content.